Nonverbal communication may be defined as messages expressed by non-linguistic means. This rules out sign language and written words, but it includes messages transmitted by vocal means that don't involve language, such as sighs, laughs, throat clearing, and other assorted noises. In addition, our definition allows us to explore non-linguistic dimensions of the spoken word: volume, rate, pitch, and so on. It also encompasses more abstract factors such as physical appearance, the environment in which we communicate, how close or how far we stand from each other, and the way we use time. All behavior has a communicative value. Suppose you tried not to communicate any message at all. What would you do? Stop talking? Close your eyes? Leave the room? You could probably see that even these behaviors communicate a message that you are avoiding contact. Now, one study demonstrated this fact when communicators were told not to express nonverbal clues. Others viewed them as dull, withdrawn, uneasy, aloof, and deceptive. Now, this impossibility of not communicating is extremely important to understand because it means that each of us is a kind of transmitter that cannot be shut off. No matter what we do, we give off information about ourselves. Of course, we don't always intend to send nonverbal messages. Unintentional nonverbal behaviors differ from intentional ones. For example, we often stammer, blush, frown, and sweat without meaning to do so. Whether or not our nonverbal is intentional, others recognize it. Nonverbal communication is primarily relational. For instance, think about what happens when you attend a party where you're likely to meet strangers you would like to get to know better. Instead of managing impressions verbally like, "Hi, I'm an attractive, friendly, easygoing person," you behave in ways that will present this image. You might smile a lot, perhaps try to strike a relaxing pose. It's also likely that you dress carefully, even if that requires looking as though you hadn't given a lot of attention to your appearance. Along with impression management, nonverbal communication reflects and shapes the kinds of relationships we have with others. Nonverbal communication performs a third valuable social function, conveying emotions that we may be unwilling or unable to express, or ones that we may not even be aware of. In fact, nonverbal communication is much better suited to expressing attitudes and feelings than ideas. You could prove this by imagining how you could express each item on the following list nonverbally. You're tired. You're in favor of capital punishment. You're attracted to another person in the group. You think prayer in schools should be allowed. You're angry at someone in the room. Nonverbal communication occurs in the mediated messages we send and receive. The most obvious way to represent nonverbal expressions is to use emoticons. If someone asked you for directions to the nearest drugstore, you might say, "North of here about 2 blocks," repeating your instructions nonverbally by pointing north. This sort of repetition isn't just decorative. People remember comments accompanied by gestures more than those made with words alone. Complementing nonverbal behaviors match the thoughts and emotions the communicator is expressing linguistically. You can appreciate the value of this function by imagining the difference between saying "thank you" with a sincere facial expression and tone of your voice and saying the same words in a deadpan manner. Substituting. So when a friend asks "what's up?" you might shrug your shoulders instead of answering with words. Many facial expressions operate substitutes for speech, so it's easy to recognize expressions that function like verbal interjections. Nonverbal substituting can be useful when communicators are reluctant to express their feelings in words. Accenting. Just as we use italics to emphasize an idea in print, we use nonverbal devices to emphasize oral messages. Pointing an accusing finger adds emphasis to criticism. Accenting certain words with the voice, "It was your idea," is another way to add nonverbal emphasis. Nonverbal behaviors can serve regulating function by influencing the flow of verbal communication. We can regulate conversations nonverbally by nodding, looking away, or moving toward the door. Of course, most of us have learned the hard way that nonverbal signals like these don't guarantee that the other people will pay attention to, interpret, or respond to them in the ways we had hoped. People often express contradicting messages in their verbal and nonverbal behaviors. A common example of this sort of mixed message is the experience that we've all had hearing someone with a red face, bulging veins yelling, "Angry? I'm not angry." In situations like these, we tend to believe the nonverbal message more so than the words. The use of time depends greatly on culture. Some cultures, North American, German, and Swiss, tend to be monochronic, emphasizing punctuality, schedules, and completing one task at a time. Other cultures, South American, Mediterranean, and Arab, are more polychronic, with flexible schedules in which multiple tasks are pursued at the same time. The first area of nonverbal communication is the broad field of kinesics, or body position and motion. We'll start with body orientation, the degree to which we face toward or away from someone with our body, feet, and head. You can learn a great deal about how people feel by observing the way people position themselves. So the next time you're in a crowded place where people can choose whom to face directly, try noticing who seems to be included in the action and who's being subtly shut out. Movements of the hands and arms are also known as gestures, and they are an important type of nonverbal communication. The most common form of gestures are what social scientists call illustrators, movements that accompany the speech but don't stand on their own. Studies have shown that it is easier to comprehend and learn a second language when it is accompanied by illustrators and other nonverbal cues. The second type of gestures is emblems, deliberate nonverbal behaviors that have a precise meaning and are known to virtually everyone within a cultural group. Unlike illustrators, emblems can stand on their own and often function as replacements for words. For instance, the thumbs up sign means good in the United States, but is an obscene gesture in Iraq and several other countries. The third type of gestures is adapters, unconscious bodily movements in response to the environment. For instance, shivering when it's really cold and folding your arms to get warmer are examples of adapters. Of course, sometimes we cross our arms when we're feeling cold toward another person, and thus the adapters can reveal the climate of the relationship. In particular, self-touching behaviors are sometimes called manipulators, are often a sign of discomfort, such as fiddling your hands or rubbing your arms during an interview. The face and eyes are probably the most noticed parts of the body, but this doesn't mean that their nonverbal messages are the easiest to read. First, it is difficult to describe the number of kind of expressions we produce with our face and eyes. Second, facial expressions are difficult to understand because of the speed at which they can change. For example, slow motion films show micro expressions fleeting across a subject's face in as short time as it takes to blink an eye. Without being aware, liars may leak how they genuinely feel through brief furrows of their brow, pursing of the lips, or crinkling around their eyes. Micro-expressions like these are more likely to occur during what's known as high-stakes lying, such as when there are severe punishments for being caught. Keep in mind that slow-motion recordings and trained professionals are often required to pick up these brief deception clues. Another factor to consider with eyes is that eyes may communicate either submission or dominance of another person. Social scientists use the term paralanguage to describe nonverbal vocal messages. For example, note how many meanings come from a single sentence just by shifting the emphasis from one word to another. This is a fantastic communication book. 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 So there are many other ways which we communicate paralinguistically through tone, rate, pitch, volume, and even through pauses. Unintentional pauses, those times when people stop to collect their thoughts before deciding how to best continue their verbal message. It's no surprise that liars tend to have more unintentional pauses than the truth tellers, as they often make up stories on the fly. A second type of pause is the vocalized pause. These range from disfluency, such as to filler words that are used habitually, such as like, okay, and you know. Social scientists use the word haptics to describe the study of touching. Touch can communicate many messages and signal a variety of relationships, such as the following: functional and professional, such as a dental exam or a haircut; social and polite, through a handshake; friendship and warmth, a clap on the back; aggression, through shoves and slaps. Touch plays a powerful role in shaping how we respond to others. Besides increasing liking, touch also increases compliance. Proxemics is the study of the way people and animals use space. There are at least two dimensions of proxemics: distance and territoriality. Each of us carries around a sort of invisible bubble of personal space wherever we go. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall has defined 4 distances that most North Americans use every day. The first of Hall's 4 spatial zones begins with skin contact and ranges to about 18 inches. We usually use intimate distance with people who are emotionally the closest to us, and then mostly in private situations, such as comforting or protecting. The second spatial zone is personal distance, and that ranges from 18 inches at its closest to 4 feet at its farthest. Its closer range is the distance at which most couples stand in public. The far range runs from about 2.5 to 4 feet. As Hall puts it, at this distance we can keep someone at arm's length. The third spatial zone is social distance, and that ranges from 4 feet to about 12 feet. Within it are the kinds of communication that usually occur in business. Its closer range from 4 to 7 feet is the distance at which conversations usually occur between salespeople and customers and between people who work together. We use the far range of social distance, 7 to 12 feet, for more formal and impersonal situations. Public distance in Hall's term is the farthest zone, running outward from 12 feet. The closer range of the public distance is the one that most teachers use in classrooms. In the farther range of public space is 25 feet, and the two-way communication is almost impossible. Choosing the optimal distance can have a powerful effect on how we regard others and how we respond to them. Personal space is the invisible bubble we carry around as an extension of our physical being. Territory remains stationary. Any geographical area, such as a work area, room, house, or other physical space for which we assume some kind of rights, is our territory. What's interesting about territoriality is that there is no real basis for the assumption of proprietary rights of owning many areas. The way people use space can communicate a good deal about power and status. Generally, we grant people with higher status more personal territory and greater privacy. So we knock before entering the boss's office, whereas she can usually walk into our area without hesitating. Social scientists use the term chronemics to describe the study of how humans structure time. In a culture that values time highly, waiting can be an indicator of status. Important people, whose time is supposedly more valuable than that of others, may be seen by appointment only, whereas it is acceptable to intrude without notice on lesser beings. Time can be a marker not only for power and status, but also of relationships. Research shows the amount of time spent with relational partners sends an important message about valuing that person. In one study analyzing 20 nonverbal behaviors, spending time together was the most powerful predictor of both relational satisfaction and perceived interpersonal understanding. Time is also measured and valued in mediated communication. Studies show that the length of time it takes someone to respond to an email message or to posting in virtual groups has strong correlation with perceptions of that person. As you might guess, quick responses get positive appraisals, while tardy or neglected replies can have an adverse effect on the trust and effectiveness in virtual groups.